Have I got a treat for you? Oh, I'm so excited about my guest today. Not that I'm not excited about all of my guests, but this guest is very cute. You're going to love her. You're absolutely going to love her. We're going to be talking today about how to qualify your law firm's leads with leading legal tech. Now, I know law firms aren't always that hot on tech. It's a little bit risky, a little bit out there, but today is going to change your mind, okay? Because we're going to be talking about some really smart automation stuff that you can do to not only get more leads into your law firm, but actually how to qualify them properly and how to get them to be turning into paying clients, which is what we all want, is it not? Can I get a hell yeah? Right, if you're here, I've got so much energy today, I'm ready for this. If you are here, tell me that you are here, please, 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 please say hello in the comments, say hi, say what you're doing here, say, why you're here. That would be awesome as well. Anything you want to say, pop it in there. If you've got any questions for my guest or I today, then also pop them in there too. So. Brittany is my guest today, Brittany Hernandez from Gavel. Okay, so she's going to be introducing herself in a moment. I'm going to give her the nod or the wink. Can't actually wink. That's appalling, isn't it? There you go. Brittany, introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. I'm so happy to be here. And thank you so much to Becky for inviting me. So yes, as you mentioned, my name is Brittany Hernandez. I work with Gavel, which is an automation company that focuses on helping lawyers to be efficient in their practices and also scale and consider different alternatives for fee structures and being able to utilize tech to implement that. So I am a lawyer myself. So I'm from San Diego, California. I'm licensed in California, and I came over to London a couple of years ago to get a master's degree after law school in international film business. So I'm very excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, I did not know about you. So that is very cool. And the other great thing is that you're actually leaving the UK tomorrow. So yes. we had to get this live in today because I was like, right, the time difference is going to be a pain otherwise. So let's just put it in the diary. We'll make it happen, and then you may leave the country. Okay, then you can go.
Then I'll be allowed. Yes, thank you so much.
But not before then. So I'll give you a little bit of context as to how Brittany and I met. We met back in June. A few weeks ago, at the Legal Geek event in London. Oh, it was so much fun. We had all of these games outside to play. I was just asking before we came live what the game was. Cornhole is apparently the American version of this. I believe we know it as the corn toss. It's like that game where you have like the little sack and then you throw it and try and get it in the hole. Yeah. Maybe tell the audience about your experience of playing that game with me, because it was fun.
So what I learned about you is that you're very cool and fun, but you're also a trash talker. So you are brutal. Before every shot, it was, a barrage of like, you can't do it, you suck. And I was just like, So I have known now that you are competitive, but also when we had our chat later, super personable. So I was like, there is another side to Becky Whitaker.
Oh, there are many sides to Becky.
There are many.
You have no idea. You have no idea.
Dimensional.
I know, right? So yeah, we just had such a laugh, and it was like, oh, I need to get this woman on my show because she's funny, and we're gonna have a lovely time. There was also the speed networking, wasn't there, which was wild too, that we did. So yeah.
That was very cool. I met a lot of people from that, which was really, really fun. I love that they do that.
Yeah, me too. I mean, it was absolutely exhausting, and I must get a drink afterwards because I've just been talking solidly, really quickly for like 20 minutes or however long it was. But yeah. Oh my goodness. Right. Let's get into it. And before we do, actually, I am dropping a special offer today, and it's the first time, this has ever been done. Okay. I mean, maybe it's not ever been done on LinkedIn, but first time I've done it, so that's why it's cool for me. Okay, so during the course of this live, hopefully you will have had an invite to join the waitlist. The actual link has now been dropped in the event. Okay, so head to the event description and you will see a link. Okay, you can get yourself a one-page website review for an absolute bargain price, but there's only 5 spots, and it's only valid while we're live. Okay, so as soon as we go off air, it's gone. You've missed your chance, never to be repeated. Apart from next week. No, not really. Be something new next week. So yeah, before I forget, I must keep mentioning that. So automation. I read a stat on your website, okay, and it said 90% of legal services will be delivered online by 2030, which really blew my mind because that's really not that far away, right?
Not that far away at all. We see it happening right now. And that's why I think it's so important to come on as many podcasts and shout the message from every rooftop that I can to say it is time to start automating right now and to understand the concept of legal productization and what that means for you as a lawyer. No matter where you are in the world, this is happening. We can see it with Amicable as an example here in the UK for DIY divorces. But in the US, we have an equivalent that's actually built on Gavel called Hello Divorce. So we're seeing more people consuming legal products digitally without the one-on-one time of a lawyer, which if you think about it, it's actually better for both parties. You're able to scale that out as the lawyer. And for the person who's on the other side, the consumer, they're able to access cheaper or more affordable legal services while still having these excellent, deliverables. So it's very exciting and it's happening right now.
I see. And then obviously once they have a fabulous service, then they're going to go back to that firm and, for any other legal matter that they might need. So that's fantastic. Do you want to just talk us through, like, in simple terms so we can understand, because not all of us are tech whizzes, how that kind of automation works?
Yeah, absolutely. So essentially the work product of a lawyer would be their expertise around their particular area, understanding the nuances of a particular type of law, but also their legal templates, right? And so when you're preparing a template that is, a Word document or PDF document, it can be a little bit challenging because you want to be able to do this in a very efficient way and not spend your time on kind of administrative, repeatable work. Anything that can be repeated can be automated. So that's the idea of I'm typing the person's name here as well as here in the document, as well as here in the document. I'm manually typing that out, for example. So when it comes to things like document automation, which is, Gavel's bread and butter and where we really thrive, is this idea that you're able to set your documents up one time through this process of creating what's called a workflow, where you have sort of question and answers that you would fill out one time. And then you're able to have that information stored in the system, populate the document, and then you can reuse that information in the future without having to retype anything. And you can also add very complex conditionals. So you can say, for example, from a logic perspective, let's say you're preparing a will of some kind, and you have, for example, you don't know how many of somebody's beneficiaries there will be in advance. So you need to have something like a repeating item for that particular piece, which would be that, for example, they have 5 children, but somebody else has 2. You can adapt that based on, what you enter in for that particular client. Also, you can have conditions around how many children they entered. So, for example, you can have a paragraph show only if the person has more than 2 children, or you can have, multiple conditions being that they're from, England versus Scotland versus Wales versus anywhere. So you can add these conditions and have complex conditionals yourself using our no code word add-in. So it's that kind of concept, if that's as basic as I can kind of describe it, is you're taking your work product as a lawyer, your expertise, and turning that into something that can be repeated at scale without you having to manually spend time doing something that can be automated.
Got it. Yeah, I understand that. So I'm sure that was a great explanation. If anyone needs any more clarification, please let us know in the chat box. Yeah, and I love this because, the legal tech that's on the market today, you're really looking at, and I know there's a lot of misconceptions. I know there's like the whole AI, terrifying, people aren't going to need lawyers anymore. We're all going to be robots, all that kind of stuff.
Already a robot. Just kidding.
very, very glamorous robot. Stop it! I'm trying to ask you a serious question. I guess what I really love about this is that you're really playing to the lawyer strengths, right? So there's that element, but so also that there's no worry that your job's going to be taken away from you. It's just this is going to make life so much easier, and it's going to make it better for your client as well.
100%. And that's what I really want to focus on too, is it's not only about your experience internally as someone who is automating your documents and making your life easier and your team's life easier, but also the consumer's experience will be improved and enhanced because you're able to offer things like client portals where they can log into a particular place, see their answers, see their saved answers, log in and continue something later if you assign them, something to fill out for you. And because you have this kind of linked system between your account and their client portal, you're able to see the information that they've entered and saved in real time. So you're able to use that information as needed and see what their progress is. If you need to prompt them to finish what what they started, because you're needing to collect this information to carry out your engagement with them. So I just feel like there's a lot of client experience as well as internal lawyering experience that can actually be enhanced with the use of automation and technology.
Yeah, that's right. Because I know, maybe some people that haven't been experiencing any kind of work with lawyers, but I know there's a lot of repetitive stuff. There's, you filled in this form and then you get another form and it's pretty much the same thing. And you've got to fill in your address like 25 times. Like that's not a good use of anybody's time. So this is just
100%. That's actually a perfect example of what I'm talking about when it comes to enhancing the client experience with a client portal. So for example, let's say that you need to collect that initial information, like somebody's name and their address and whatever else. What you can also do there is make it to where they have that, initial client intake form or whatever else. While they're logged in, that's getting saved. And because we have this feature of data persistence, if you, when you're setting this up, have the same variable underlying name for things like this person's first name or their address or whatever else, anytime that piece of information about them comes up again in the future, it will automatically be populated for them. So like you said, nobody will ever need to write their address again, but they do have the opportunity to correct it if they've changed their address, for example. So it's not set in stone, but it is there so they don't have to type anything again when they know you already have that information. So it also makes you look and, seem more organized and professional as well.
Yeah, which is never a bad thing, right?
Right. And it also reduces error if you think about it. So if this is something that has been, entered before, somebody's not having to type and maybe fumble through their answers, miss a word, like miss a letter, miss a number or whatever else for their phone number or their email address. We're able to kind of make sure that that is consistent information and entered consistently throughout each of the different processes.
Yeah, I get that completely. Awesome. So common misconceptions then around automation. What do your customers say? Like before they're on board, before they're like, yep, sign me up, gavel me up, whatever it is you guys say over there.
Gavel me up. I'm definitely taking that one. So actually, I love this question because I wanted to kind of think about, what do I hear or what do I as a lawyer when I first started, what was my own resistance to it? And I think number one, from like people who have been in practice for a long time and have their own set way of doing things, maybe they still, take a call and write things down on a piece of paper, which is fine too. But when you think about that, the misconception here would be that I can continue doing what worked for me for 40 years and still remain competitive in the marketplace, even though my competitors are now using legal technology. So that would probably be like my number one thing is we've been profitable for 40 years. Why do we need to change? We have no incentive to do so. And I think if you actually look at what's happening in the market and you're seeing that not only your competitors are, your competitor lawyers are using technology now, and that means they're able to take your clients away from you at a lower rate because they're able to get more clients and scale that up. And they're also being able to offer those things like client portals, streamlined experiences, not having to go back and forth in email, like, what was your address again? And can I collect this? And so on. So that kind of, competition is making it to where, your competitors will be able to take more share of the market. Even if you have loyal customers, you're going to be not able to grab the rest of the market, if that makes sense. So I think that that's probably one of the biggest common misconceptions about automation or resistance towards it is that we've been doing the same thing the same way. We've always been profitable and we don't see any reason to change. So I do think that's probably my number one. Another one would be that people probably think about automation and technology as this thing that's like very outside of their control and other to
Mhm.
them, in the sense that like, oh, I would need to hire and spend money on a lot of developers, and I don't even know where to
Mhm.
start with that. And actually, this is something that is highly in your control. So all you need to do is start your free trial, like try it out, and you can actually automate your own documents yourself. So you don't need to hire some expensive development team and go
Mhm.
through this process of, spending time trying to find those people. This is actually something that's very much in your control. So I think that that's probably, and it's something that you can do today, right now. It's not something that is so far in the future. So I think that
Mhm.
that's really a common misconception as well, is that it's not within my control and it's going to be something that I would need to hire other people and then take time away from my day job to explain what needs to be done when I don't really know what needs to be done.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's a big one. I think another one is this idea that it just means documents. Like we, as Gavel, for example, we really focus on document automation, but there's actually so much more that can be automated. And when you think of it in terms of not just automating your documents, but automating your processes, then your mind can
Mhm.
really open up to the possibilities that you can have here, especially with what Becky, with generating new leads. For
Mhm.
example, maybe the ability to automate tracking lead sources, maybe the like using a system or technology that allows you to automatically see where this person was before they came to your website, what search terms were they using, things like that. So you can think more broadly in the sense of, also, how do I connect that database where the person, I can see that information about them, connect that information. Let's say if they've entered their information for your newsletter, how can you reuse that data in documents that you prepare for them in the future without ever having to retype in their name and email address and address and whatever else. So it's more about thinking about your process and the client's journey from being a stranger to being a customer and to being a loyal customer who helps refer other people, seeing as this process and journey that has multiple different touch points that have or lend themselves to automation. And I'm sure you probably have something to say about that as well, because you think a lot
Mhm.
about SEO optimization. What
Mhm.
type of language and keywords are people using to find your website? I mean, that's your bread and butter. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that and have a couple more that I'd love to go into as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I mean, user journey, SEO, like all that stuff is just, I just love that shit. That is just
Yeah,
like what I
me
do. And I find it so fascinating. I absolutely love like looking at those kind of analytics. Like I know Hotjar is one of them where you can,
right.
look at a web page and you can like see the user journey. You can see the buttons they clicked on. You can see how long they spent on this particular page. You can see the page they went to next. And then once you have that information is just so powerful because then it tells you what your audience actually want from you. That's like, oh, well, they weren't spending very much time on this page. That can't be very valuable for them. But they've actually spent time on this blog that we wrote about this, for instance. So
Exactly.
you can really start to tailor your content and make it work. And even down to things like the color of buttons and the font and, where the text is laid out. Like there's so much that you can actually do, which is just, yeah, it's really, really powerful.
Yeah,
But
and if your competitors are seeing that information and you're not, I feel like that's
mhm,
really something that I never really thought about or considered until I was sort of in the tech world a little bit more and getting behind the scenes of seeing what these different tools do and what they look like and what the capabilities are. And I think that's really a big piece. If, like you said, that language can be, changed just very slightly, or the color can be changed just very slightly, or whatever variable that you're A/B testing in this scenario, you're able to see and have data around what is actually, and if you think about it, it's not really about what is, of course, like at the end of the day, our bottom line is going to be like what's bringing us money. But I think at the end of the day, it's also about what's actually helping our potential client understand that we can help them. So what can we do in changing our process to help the end person who we can actually help with our expertise that we've spent years, obtaining degrees about and spending endless, sleepless nights reading cases about. arguing in front of, judges about, and, negotiating with co-counsel about, and all these different pieces that make up our expertise, we can help someone who fits a particular type of need, right? And so how can we, from your perspective, help them understand that this website has the information that they need, and making sure that that's there by working with someone like you, for example, and by creating lead generation and simultaneous qualification, workflows with Gavel, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my goodness. There's so much potential here. And I think going back to your previous point about like the kind of firm that goes, well, this is how we've always done it. Literally hate
Right.
that saying, by the way. Please don't ever say that to me, because
Yeah.
I'm just like, "Ah, okay, that might be the way you've always done it, but the world is moving like really, really quickly. So you need to keep up." So, and I think it kind of feels like there's almost like this undercurrent of like stuff, especially if they're not buying into it or not even looking into what it can do. I feel like there's this undercurrent of like changes that are happening that they're not even aware of. Like their clients are probably just being taken from them, just being swept away without them even really kind of knowing what's happening until it's too late.
And maybe you don't have tech letting you know that, right? Maybe you don't have even a process. You don't have to always have tech be the answer. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it is writing something down on a piece of paper. For me, for example, when I'm preparing for something like this, I like to physically write down like what I'm going to say, or like what I want to think about, or what my main points are. And for me, that kind of act or kinesthetic process of sitting down and writing something down helps me to remember it, and also helps me feel more prepared so I can show up more confidently. Those types of things help. But in some ways, there's just not something that you could manually do. You need the help or aid of technology to show you the numbers. Maybe, for example, like we talked about just now, you are trying to gauge how many customers month over month you are gaining versus previous years. So if you don't have some way of tracking the numbers, even if it's an Excel spreadsheet where you look at the end of the month and you say, how many clients do I have? That's still using legal technology in some ways, because you're able to utilize a piece of software, free or paid, that helps you to determine where you are in your business, where you're going, and maybe even see a graph that your customers are going down, and that helps you to have a clue to investigate why that might be happening.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, the point that I mainly is going to jump back on there is, are we supposed to prepare for these things, Brittany?
Oh my gosh, yeah, no, it's so funny
I intend to prepare.
For the most part for this one, because I was like, she's got me, she's got my back. She'll guide me and help me. I was like, I don't need to prepare. And then I was like, well, maybe there's a couple things I want to just make sure I know what I'm saying.
Oh yeah, definitely best to prepare.
And which, for example, brings me back to two more points I wanted to make about common misconceptions around automation. The first is that it's expensive. So, and I think one of the misconception here is probably because a lot of the software that came out initially has been for enterprise customers, meaning people who have like more than 200 employees, right? Huge companies where you're like a tiny like operation, right? Like maybe it's just you're a sole practitioner, which was the case for me. So I was using technology like Clio, for example, before I heard about anything else, where it's like a lot less expensive than something that would be used by, DLA Piper. I don't need the same solution as that company, right? Like that firm has different needs than me. Maybe, for example, they need more collaboration features. Maybe they need more customization. Maybe they need their own dedicated, separate, hosting of some kind. Like whatever they need, that bill is going to be a lot higher than what I can carry as a sole practitioner or somebody who has a boutique law firm, right? So I think that the misconception has been shaped by like what has come out before solutions for smaller firms. And a lot of legal tech companies will specifically target these bigger companies because it means like they're able to survive, right? If you come in with a $15 a month product, you're going to need a lot of customers. And if you're just brand new, that means you have to invest a lot in educating the market that you exist at all before you can make a profit off of $15, right? So that's the idea that a lot of people will see as their end target market these bigger companies or these bigger firms. But for people like Gavel, for example, or companies like Gavel, we actually really want to support the complete opposite end of that, where we can have customers that are enterprise. Of course, we can still support their needs, but we also want to offer a solution that's affordable for someone who is a sole practitioner, or someone who is at a boutique firm, or somebody who isn't making the same type of revenue as someone as massive as a DLA Piper, or link ladders, or whatever else, right? And then finally, the other common misconception I wanted to address is that it takes too much time to implement. So you talked a little bit about earlier this idea that there can be like a little bit of resistance and fear to adopting technology, not only because of like, oh, it might take too much time and I don't have time and things like that, which is a completely valid thing to say as somebody who is also very busy. But also that, that resistance and fear around using like artificial intelligence and not really knowing what the ramifications are, consequences if you get it wrong, for example. And in this particular context, it can actually be quite quick to automate your documents with Gavel, for example, with the aid of AI, because we have this feature that's called Gavel Blueprint, which allows someone to, let's say, take their document, whether it be a PDF or a Word document, and just drag and drop it into our system. It's going to look for the areas where things would repeat, right? Like if it's company name and company name here, here, and here, it's going to look for those, and it's going to suggest variables and questions and question types that you can use to then in the future populate those different areas and aspects of the document. So it's going to do that in about a minute or so. So it is something that is within the realm of not only your control, but also your time limitations.
Yeah, and that's such an important point, because I think a lot of people, and this is true across any industries, when they think about implementing new tech, it's like, oh my goodness, first of all, I've got to get everyone on board. They've all got to agree with it. And then we're just going to have to like basically admit that we're not going to get anything done for the next month or whatever it is, while we just transfer everything over with this new system. But it's obviously not the case. And the fact that you do have a free trial and you can just just get involved, play with it, see what happens, see if you like it, and go from there is definitely very reassuring, I feel sure, for law firms especially. Make sure that you attend my next LinkedIn Live, because I am going to be dropping a very special offer, and it's only going to be available for LinkedIn Live attendees. So come and find me on LinkedIn and get on the action. When you're feeling a little bit risk averse and you're not really sure if this is going to work for you, then give it a go and find out. Which also leads me to my next question, which is can you automate literally any kind of workflow? Is there any exceptions in law, or how does that work?
I think that's a really good question, actually. So the way that I would answer this is that is the lawyer's answers, right? Like it depends, right? So
it depends.
It depends on how you visualize and map out your client's journey, because every practice area is going to be slightly different. So let's say, for example, like somebody was saying that they could have but chose not to automate or to like take off the phone number of the firm, for example, and instead they kind of automated it in a way in that they hired like a virtual assistant to answer the phone versus like them as the lawyer. So that's one example where people want to talk to a human right away and feel reassured, and that's something that you can delegate, but it's not automated, if that makes sense. So there are going to be aspects of but the underlying part of what information is gathered can be put into a software system that connects to other things that can lead to automation. But there might be pieces of your client's journey that you choose not to automate in that particular sense of like, oh, you never speak to a human and nothing ever happens that isn't scalable or whatever. Because, for example, maybe that person feels, even if they end up not winning their case, or even if they end up not working with you, they've learned something about you, which is that you are available to them to speak to them from a human to human level. So there are pieces of to that aspect of practicing law that I would say you would consider you would weigh, the pros and cons of automation in that sense. Now, when it comes to the idea of, are there things in the practice of law that cannot be automated? I would say your creative aspects of your judgment as a lawyer and being able to spot the places where there's room for creative arguments, for example. So from the perspective of automation, there's kind of this idea too of like rules-based versus like creative activities, right? So when you're talking about like rules-based automation, which is really like kind of where Gavel lives, is this idea that you are able to do this to a very complex level, but it's not going to generate something like different than what you told it to do. So that actually is good in a lot of contexts, because it means that when you say, for example, run that workflow and you have the documents generated, what that means is you can have, confidence that it's been prepared the way that you set it up. And there's no room for creativity, and, ChatGPT is not going to come in and like write a poem in the middle of your confidentiality agreement or something. Right?
Imagine that.
Yeah, exactly. So there are places where you want that outcome. So you can say, for example, like what I was saying about conditional logic and like variables and repeating items, you can designate where everything goes and how the logic is set up. So from the standpoint of complexity of the law, where somebody is saying like, oh, there's no way I can turn that into an automation because it's too complex. It has too many variables, too many, exceptions or whatever else. I would say if you're able to walk through in a consistent way from beginning to end the evaluation of a scenario. So for example, let's say that you are preparing something for someone and you have to determine which clauses get entered, and you're going through the process and you're saying, mapping out what is your process? What questions do you ask yourself, right? You're asking yourself something like, what jurisdiction is this in? So that's a question you could ask, right? So that's something that would be a variable that has to do with what gets entered into the end agreement. Maybe it's how old the person is. Maybe it's whether or not they have more than 5 beneficiaries. Maybe if we go to like shareholders, what percentages they each have and having that automatically calculated, or whatever the case may be. If you're able to systematically go through and say something like, if these 5 conditions are met, but not these 10 conditions, or if these 2 conditions, but not those 5 conditions are met, then this is the outcome. And there's 5 different branches of logic. You can set that up. So that is the kind of idea that, is there anything in the law that cannot be automated? I would say yes, because there are these pieces that are like, human to human elements that you wouldn't want to automate for the particular reason of understanding how human beings behave and the psychology around, retaining customers and encouraging customer confidence and happiness and trust. And then there's the other piece, which is, if we're going to talk about, though, like levels of complexity as well as logic, it can be, if you understand those to the point where you could put them down on a piece of paper and match out the outcomes. When I differentiate that from your creativity as a lawyer, right? I think that's a distinction where I would say that it lies in the realm of the human lawyer's creativity and being able to look at a scenario and find issues that maybe the other lawyer didn't see on the other side of the case. So I hope that kind of answers it. Very long-winded. Yes, but also no, but also yes.
But maybe, and then there's this, and that's perfect. That's perfect. And what was I going to say? Because I've just gone off a tangent there. I was going to say 20 hours a week is your claim of time that you can save by using automation, which is a pretty sweeping statement. That's very cool. So I guess what I was going to say is actually 2 questions. My questions are twofold. The first one is, who are the people within a law firm that are typically able to save this time? What are the roles that they're using?
Okay, good. So I guess this would depend a little bit on the structure of the firm. So let's say, for example, a solo, it would be that person who is, saving the time, versus somebody who has a 2-man operation where maybe they have a paralegal preparing some of this stuff. So it depends on the size and roles within a law firm, or if you are working in-house, for example, as well. But what we've seen, let's say, with the solo, that's the easy answer. The person who is preparing it would be the one who's saving the time. For somebody who has a paralegal, for example, because this system, if you're using Gavel as an example in this case, because the system is very easy to use and understand, then let's say, for example, your paralegal used to spend 20 hours a week just on the task of typing manually in somebody's name and address over and over and over again in an 80-page document or something, then that's the person who's saving time. But also you are saving time in the review process as the person who reviews that person's information, because you know how it was prepared. So maybe when you go through, you're able to see exactly where the content hinges because you set that up or you directed how it was set up. So that also not only saves the paralegal time in preparation of some agreements that you then review, but you've also saved time then in the review process. So I think it trickles down depending on how you set things up and who's involved in that process and how big your organization is. So anyone who's preparing any kind of documents. However, I'll also add that obviously that statistic is going to be pulling from the fact that you're, saving like 90% of the draft time on your documents because you're able to just push information from one workflow or source of data input to another where you're going to output a new document, for example. What I mean by that is, let's say you've set it up to where you have a client intake form that you've built with Gavel. You have the person fill out their information before they speak to you. Because that information gets used all the time in multiple documents, you can just take that initial instance. And when I say push, I just mean you're sharing that, literally by saying push information into this other workflow. That's how you're able to move information that has the same underlying, variable or condition. So for example, like contact's first name, contact's address, or whatever their answer was in some particular instance to something else. That's where the paralegal and your time gets saved from a drafting perspective without having to retype anything you already have information about. But also think about the fact that you're saving the client's time as well. So I know that we're talking about like whose time is being saved, and think about what we said about you having to enter your information and your address in 5 times when you know that they already have it. So I feel like that can also be viewed from the other side, which is that you have been able to save yourself time, your paralegal time, your team's time, as well as your client's time.
Yeah. Okay. And I really love that about the review, actually, because if you're reviewing a document and you're spotting that, I don't know, there's a spelling error in the name or in the address, then your eye is going to be drawn to that. And you're not going to be able to have as much focus on the rest of the document, to review it. That's not a lawyer's job to check that, the name or address is spelled correctly. It should be the really complex stuff, So I think naturally, you're reviewing something that's got those really basic errors in it, you don't look at it as carefully because you've just drawn to those kind of obvious things. So yeah, I think that's a great point to make about review.
And I also think that it allows you to delegate more complex drafting and like of that initial drafting to a different team member. So for example, if we consider what I mentioned about complex conditional logic and how you could have a scenario that has multiple conditions that says, for example, only show this clause and this clause in the case that the person is married. So let's say, for example, there's something where you're creating a trust and you're trying to ask in the questionnaire, either internally or client facing, whichever the case may be, you're having things that other people don't necessarily understand or know what the conditions are, but you do in setting it up. That can be quite complex, right? So it can be like, if the person has a spouse and if they have children, then show these 5 clauses. Then and you can make it to where the rest of the document adjusts to those paragraphs being inserted or taken out, right? Or entire pages, whether you want there to be an exhibit page or not. All of these different pieces can be set up by you, and the person who's preparing it doesn't have to know all of the things. That's why you can delegate these to, let's say, a paralegal where you do the review, knowing what information you said should show or hide depending on different conditions. So I think that's a really important piece as well, where you're not saying like, oh, my paralegal can only really prepare for me very, very basic things, because otherwise we need them to go through this massive, branching logic exercise that only I really know. And that's okay that you are the only one who knows that. And that's why it's valuable for you to be the one who sets that up, or that you explain how it has to be set up if you're working with like an expert in Gavel, for example.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. That sounds incredibly clever. There must be some very clever people in your team. Very good. Very good.
Really, really, honestly, I feel so grateful and lucky every day. Sometimes I will literally sit in our meetings and I'm just like amazed that I get to be on the team. I'm just like, I hope nobody realizes that I'm here because I'm just listening in. I'm just happy to be here.
Oh, I love that. So I guess, I mean, I'm going to jump in and kind of give a bit of advice about implementing this kind of tech, which, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, which I may well be, because, but if you are considering implementing some automation tech like Gavel, then I guess one of the first things you should do is write down all of your repetitive tasks, all of your workflows that you're literally doing over and over and over again. Just first of all, to make sure that you do have a strong use case for implementing it in your firm. I think that would be the first thing to do. And then you've also got a really good idea moving forward, what you actually want the software to do for you. Because I think some people think, oh, we're just going to get this software and it's going to do this and it's going to do that. And I think it's about managing expectations as well, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I think that's a really good place to start as well, because I think a lot of people neglect this part. And I think it's really important, just kind of like just taking 1 second to like sit down and kind of think about what you do right now, essentially is what you're saying. Is you're basically saying like, sit down and think about what do we do right now and what are the opportunities for automation in this process. And I would kind of say one thing I would add to that is not only like the repetitive task part, but the like one layer above that would be like to consider your client's journey overall, or how, like, what is the ideal scenario, which would be, for example, they don't know about us. They have a way to find out about us. They get onto our website. This goes into your piece around sort of lead generation. How do we, once they get there, how can we make sure that they know that they're in the right place for those people who would be good to work with? How do we qualify them in a very efficient way? How can we then, do you know what I mean? Like, so if you sit down and map out your client's life cycle, their sales cycle with you, from not knowing you at all to learning about you, working with you, and then actually afterwards, maybe helping other people come to you from a referral perspective, then you can actually look along those lines and that map out that process. And within that process, see what repeats, if that makes sense. So what you said is actually perfect, but I would just have one layer above that, which is the client's journey and everything that you do on your side during those stages, and then what repeats there that you could automate, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, lovely. That is really good to think about that step beforehand as well. Okay, cool. Well, I'm conscious that we're going to nearly wrap up because we're nearly 44 minutes in, which is awesome. I feel like we could talk forever, but we won't. Don't worry. We're not going to keep you on forever because I think you might get sick of us after a while. So I just wanted to drop in another very quick. If you're not hopping on that website review offer, get on it. There's only 5 spots. Okay. So if you're not doing it already, you've not got very long left, depending on how long Brittany keeps us talking for. But we've got the title of this LinkedIn Live, which is how to qualify your firm's leads with legal tech, right? And I know we've touched on it, but I think it'd be really helpful for our audience to learn, exactly how you can do that with this automation tech.
Yes. And one of the things that I was going to say about this, so I appreciate you bringing it back to the title, is that, for purposes of making it short and snappy, we're saying qualify your law firm leads with leading legal tech. And if I, as the person who hates to have to edit things down, could expand it just a little bit, I'm going to add generate and qualify your law firm leads simultaneously at scale with tech, which is a lot harder to digest all the different pieces.
Yeah, that would have been too wordy. That would have been too long, wordy.
I think. Yeah, I knew you were going to do it. If it was my choice. So that's just to break it down like this, to say, so when you work with someone like Becky, for example, who reviews your website and makes sure that you have things like guides, blog posts, checklists, do you have a newsletter at all? Where is that call to action located on your website? Are these terms SEO optimized? Are people able to find you on the internet? How are they finding you? And what happens when they get to your website, right? So that all is in this bucket of generating, people coming to your website over someone else's, maybe based on paid search or all of these other pieces that we talked about. So what I want to talk about with this idea of how do you leverage the power of some of the technology that you have and use it in multiple ways and get the most ROI out of your investment in different technology. If we're using the example of Gavel, let's say, for example, that you are someone who is an expert in veteran law. So I actually served in the United States military, before going to law school, and that's how I was able to actually pay for law school. And so when I was in the military, if you had a disability that was stemming from a service-connected disability, then you could actually get a grant to adapt your home to make it to where you can do things like add rails or a ramp or, widen the hallways so that you can have your wheelchair go through and things like that. So let's say in this scenario that you are someone who is an expert at this type of field of law and you want to be able to help people submit really strong applications for this type of grant so that, you can have this person be able to get what they need. So in that scenario, what we could create is something that not only generates people and generates new leads and, serves as a lead magnet to your website or brings them from, the ether into your space where you control what is shown to them, then you can also simultaneously use the same workflow that got them onto the website to qualify them as whether or not they're someone you should work with. So what that means and what it looks like is this idea that, let's say, for example, you offer in a blog about this type of grant, you embed a Gavel workflow that says, see if you're eligible for this type of grant in 30 seconds or less, right? And so that helps them to think, oh, like I can find out right now whether or not I'm a good candidate for this type of XYZ thing, in this case, a grant. So in that case, what you can do as the person who created this is, one, you've already created an attractive lead magnet that brought them to that blog post into your space where you can help them understand something about this, but you can also help to filter and branch logic off of people's answers. And in this particular case, there are 3 answers that are the hinge of whether or not somebody would qualify and be somebody that you as a lawyer would want to work with, right? So in that case, you're simultaneously using a single workflow that you built with Gavel to bring someone to your website at the same time as qualify them and put them down different paths depending on their answers. If they said that they have one of the service qualifying disabilities, whether they're using the grant money to buy, build, or change their permanent home, and whether they own or will own the home. And so if they've answered, not incorrectly, but in a way that wouldn't qualify them to be someone you could help or work with, then you have them go to a kickout page that lets them know you might be eligible for something else, but not this one. Then you could also direct the system to send someone an email who does qualify. You can email them and say, hey, it looks like you might be eligible. We'd be happy to work with you. Here's the link to our initial consultation. Call or whatever. So that's what we're talking about when we're talking using technology to qualify and generate leads at scale.
Yeah. Oh, I love that so much. And that is so perfect because not only does the client save a shed load of time to know instantly whether they are, by the way, I loved your tagline, find out now in 30 seconds or less. I mean, that is great copywriting right there. That's very impressive. I like that a lot, especially when you can get a number in, guys. You get a number in a title, it makes it more compelling and people will click on it. But that's just an extra bonus for today. But also, law firms aren't spending loads of time on the phone trying to qualify people manually and wasting, time you could be billing to do so. So yeah, absolutely love it. What a dream. So we need to wrap up, Brittany. We're 50 minutes in. It's time to go. We need to get off. So this is your 2-minute warning, guys, to grab your webpage review offer for a bargain price. Last thing for us to do is to say, if law firms are watching right now, which I know they are, and they're thinking, maybe I want a bit of this Gavel in my life, what's the best way to get a hold of you? Tell the people how to.
Absolutely. So the first thing you can do is you can go to gavel.io, gavel.io, and you can book a time for a strategy call where we can go over, one of our amazing customer success team members can go over how you can use this in your particular scenario. As I mentioned, you could be in-house, solo, large firm, small firm, boutique, etc. And so we can really look at what your particular needs are. Another thing you can do is start a free trial right away so you can start automating your documents, trying out the AI feature, adding your questions and variables, thinking about your logic, things like that. You can also just reach out to me directly at Brittany, Brittany at gavel.io. And I'd be really happy to meet with you one-on-one or answer your questions or whatever else. So lots of different ways that you can get a demo, start a free trial, reach out to me or whatever else.
Perfect. Loads of ways to get hold of you. All of the ways.
All of the ways. Connect with me on LinkedIn if you want as well, for sure.
Yeah. Well, why the hell not?
Yeah, you're already here.
So this has been an absolute delight. I have loved it, but we must talk about next week because, things move on, nothing stays the same. So next week, Wednesday, 24th at 11 a.m., so slightly earlier time, we've got Sean Jardine on. He is an absolute giant in real life because I met him last week in real life and that was a surprise. And he wasn't dressed as a penguin randomly. For those of you who know, but we're going to be talking about ditching the billable hour for good forever. So yeah, it's bound to be a controversial one. That will be really good. To get yourself registered for that one because it is on the registration link right now. So Brittany, thank you. You have been an absolute pleasure. We're ending now and we will catch you next week, guys. Cheerio.
Bye, everyone.